As the courts prepared to rule on the fate of his signature tariffs, anticipation and tension gripped the nation. The legal proceedings were not just about policy, they were about the future direction of the American economy and the power of the presidency itself. Former President Donald Trump issued a dramatic and urgent warning to the American public and lawmakers alike. He claimed that overturning his hard-fought trade policies would trigger an economic collapse so severe it could rival the devastation of the Great Depression. Trump painted a dire picture, suggesting that jobs would vanish, factories would close, and American families would face unprecedented hardship if his tariffs were dismantled. He insisted that his tariffs were not just a tool but a shield, essential for American prosperity and security. Trump credited these measures with generating billions in government revenue, reviving struggling industries, and protecting American workers from what he described as unfair foreign competition, particularly from China and other major trading partners. Trump argued passionately that stripping the president of tariff authority would leave the nation vulnerable and defenseless in a global economy filled with aggressive competitors. He warned that America's ability to respond to economic threats would be dangerously weakened. Yet despite Trump's warnings, economists across the political spectrum widely disagreed. They called his predictions unfounded, and pointed out that tariffs often act as a hidden tax on American businesses and consumers. Many argued that these policies stifled economic growth, increased costs for manufacturers, and fueled inflation, making everyday goods more expensive for families and small businesses. Most experts believe that lifting the tariffs would actually boost the economy, lower prices, and restore much-needed stability to markets. They saw the removal of these trade barriers as a path toward renewed growth and global competitiveness for American industries. The debate set the stage for a high-stakes legal showdown. Trump's vision of tariffs as a form of national defense clashing with a broad coalition of critics who saw them as self-inflicted economic harm. The nation watched as both sides prepared to make their case in court, knowing the outcome could reshape the country's economic future. As the legal battle loomed, Americans braced for a decision with profound and far-reaching economic consequences, uncertain of what the future might hold. The fight against Trump's tariffs was led by a broad and determined coalition of businesses and state governments who found themselves united by a common cause. Across the country, business leaders and state officials joined forces, setting aside political differences to confront what they saw as a direct threat to their economic well-being and constitutional rights. They argued passionately that it was local businesses, workers, and communities who bore the true cost of the trade war. For many, the tariffs meant higher prices for raw materials, shrinking profit margins, and the painful reality of layoffs or even closures. The coalition claimed the president had overstepped his constitutional authority by imposing massive import taxes without the consent of Congress. They insisted that such sweeping economic decisions should not rest in the hands of a single individual, no matter how powerful the office. At the heart of the case was a fundamental question: could the president use emergency powers to bypass Congress on matters of trade and taxation? This legal battle was about more than just tariffs. It was about the very foundation of American checks and balances. Plaintiffs argued that only Congress has the constitutional authority to regulate commerce and levy taxes, as outlined in the founding documents. They warned that allowing the president to act alone would undermine the separation of powers. They contended that Trump's actions set a dangerous precedent, one that could open the door for future presidents to sidestep Congress on critical issues, eroding democratic safeguards. The coalition detailed the economic harm in stark terms: higher costs for consumers and businesses, lost access to international markets, widespread layoffs, and reduced state revenues that threatened public services and local economies. The lawsuits challenged not just the policy itself, but the very limits of presidential power in the American system. The legal battle moved swiftly through the courts, with both sides urging the judiciary to define where executive authority ends and legislative power begins, a question with implications far beyond this single dispute. The outcome would not only determine the fate of the tariffs, but also shape the balance of power in Washington for years to come, affecting how future presidents and Congress interact. The stakes extended far beyond tariffs, touching the very structure of American government and the enduring question of who truly holds the power to shape the nation's economic destiny. The tariff lawsuits advanced slowly through the federal courts, building toward a constitutional showdown. The U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that Trump had exceeded his authority, finding the statutes he cited didn't grant a blank check for broad tariffs. The government appealed, and the federal circuit judges expressed skepticism about the executive's sweeping claims. The courts questioned whether a president could declare an economic emergency based on vague trade concerns, potentially sidelining Congress indefinitely. These rulings forced both sides to sharpen their arguments and created a clear judicial split. The central question: can the president unilaterally reshape the economy through tariffs under the guise of emergency powers? The stage was set for a Supreme Court decision that would define the limits of executive power. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods, but their impact is felt most by Americans. When tariffs raise the cost of imports, those costs ripple through the supply chain. Manufacturers, retailers, and ultimately consumers pay more. Everyday Americans face higher prices on cars, appliances, and even groceries, reducing their purchasing power. While some domestic industries benefit from less foreign competition, most businesses suffer from higher costs and disrupted supply chains. Retaliatory tariffs from other countries close off export markets, hurting U.S. farmers and manufacturers. Most economists agree tariffs create friction, uncertainty, and inefficiency, slowing growth. The revenue from tariffs is outweighed by higher consumer prices and lost competitiveness. The economy is forced to balance the supposed benefits of protectionism against the real costs of trade barriers. Tariffs, in practice, act as a hidden tax on American families and businesses. The ongoing debate over tariffs reveals a profound and persistent divide in American economic philosophy. This is not just a technical disagreement, but a clash of worldviews about the best path forward for the nation's prosperity and security. Former President Trump and his supporters have become the face of modern protectionism, passionately arguing that tariffs are essential to defend American jobs and industries from what they see as unfair foreign competition. They believe that by imposing tariffs, the government can shield American workers from the negative effects of globalization and revive industries that have suffered from decades of outsourcing. For them, tariffs are more than just taxes on imports. They are a symbol of economic nationalism, a way to prioritize domestic strength and self-sufficiency, even if it means Americans might pay more for everyday goods. Supporters claim that tariffs force foreign nations to pay a price for access to the lucrative U.S. market, ultimately benefiting American businesses and workers by leveling the playing field. On the other hand, mainstream economists across the political spectrum overwhelmingly support free trade. They argue that tariffs, while politically popular, actually harm the very economy they are meant to protect by raising costs and reducing competitiveness. According to these experts, global trade increases efficiency, drives innovation, and lowers prices for consumers. Tariffs, they warn, disrupt established markets, make goods more expensive, and can slow economic growth for everyone, not just the targeted countries. Economists also caution that tariffs often provoke retaliation from other countries, leading to trade wars that hurt American exporters, threaten jobs, and strain international relationships. The core question remains: should America wall itself off from the world to protect its industries, or should it embrace global competition and the opportunities it brings? This ideological clash between protectionism and free trade lies at the very heart of the nation's ongoing trade policy debate, shaping the future of the American economy and its role in the world. The legal battle over tariffs was always headed for the Supreme Court. Lower court rulings against the president's authority made a final appeal inevitable. The justices faced a complex question. Did Congress intend to give the president sweeping power to impose tariffs under emergency laws? Historically, the court has deferred to the executive on national security, but this case centered on economic policy, Congress's domain. The ruling would set a precedent for the balance of power between president and Congress, with global implications. The nation and the world watched, awaiting a decision that would reshape American trade policy. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court blocked Trump's sweeping tariffs, pausing their collection and sending the case back to lower courts. The ruling was a major check on presidential power and a victory for businesses and states challenging the tariffs. The court found that Congress never intended to give the executive unlimited authority to set trade policy through emergency powers. The decision reasserted Congress's constitutional role in regulating commerce and set limits on executive overreach. While the pause is temporary, its impact is immediate, halting a defining trade policy and forcing a national reckoning. The ruling sends a clear message: major economic shifts require legislative action, not unilateral executive orders. This precedent will constrain future presidents and reshape how America approaches global trade. The Supreme Court's decision jolted global markets, triggering a surge of relief and a wave of uncertainty. U.S. stock indexes soared, especially in sectors hurt by tariffs, as investors anticipated lower costs and renewed export opportunities. Currencies of major trading partners strengthened, signaling hopes for more stable trade relations. But the euphoria faded as investors realized the ruling was only a pause, not a permanent solution. Uncertainty about Congress's next move and the executive's future actions led to market volatility. The decision exposed how deeply tariffs had shaped the global economy. The long-term impact depends on whether policymakers can create a stable, predictable trade framework. For now, the world watches as a new chapter in global trade begins. The Supreme Court's decision marks a turning point, forcing a national reckoning on trade policy and presidential power. Americans may soon see lower prices and relief from inflation as tariffs are lifted. Businesses gain stability, potentially spurring investment and job growth. The ruling returns trade authority to Congress, making it harder for presidents to impose sweeping tariffs unilaterally. Future trade policy will require debate and compromise, fostering more reliable international relationships. The court's intervention reaffirms that even in national crises, the president must operate within constitutional limits. This precedent will deter future executive overreach and reshape how major policies are made. The path forward demands a new consensus on America's role in the global economy, one built on law, debate, and cooperation.